Good morning and welcome. My name is Lisa Moore. I'm head of research and advocacy at the Women's Foundation. And it's such a pleasure to be with you all this morning to moderate today's discussion on Web3, identities, and creative expressions. As we are coming down to the last couple days of the Digital Art Fair, I hope all of you tuning in online have been able to visit and see the incredible creativity and vision of the collections on display. Technology, AI, robotics, it has given us a whole new paradigm from which to consider art and expression. And increasing education, investment, and consumption in this space has wide-ranging implications for us as individuals and also for society as a whole. But it's also a rapidly evolving space, and there's lots of questions and debate bubbling around what this really means. So that's why I'm so excited to discuss these issues. And just prior to introducing our panelists, I'd like to play a very short video. Thank you. So we have three incredible female leaders that I'm so excited to introduce. This is only a small snapshot of their many accomplishments, so I encourage you to read their full bios online. With me in person, we have Caroline York. She is Marketing Director for Gusto Collective, Asia's leading brand tech group, delivering best-in-class storytelling and experiences powered by the latest immersive technologies. She brings with her over a decade of expertise in brand strategy and marketing communications in fashion retail. She was previously the executive director of luxury Italian brand Gusella and brand manager of Scheiser Greater China, where she led international multi-million-dollar brand campaigns and strategic business development. Joining us virtually from the East Coast United States, we have Angelina Kwan, who is CEO of Stratford Finance Limited and has previously held Chief Operating Officer and Directorate positions with a number of international digital asset exchanges, as well as global financial services companies. Angelina serves on a number of Hong Kong government-appointed boards and volunteers her time in various charities, including as vice chair at the Women's Foundation. And joining us virtually from the West Coast, United States, we have Sophia Hotung, a writer and illustrator and the creator of the Hong Konger art collection. Sophia's pieces have been exhibited at Art Next Expo, the Affordable Art Fair, and of course, the Digital Art Fair. She is also the author of the Hong Konger Anthology and recently published her first children's mystery novel, The Heist of Hooded Light, as K11's Artist in Residence. It's quite a tongue twister. Sophia leverages her art and writing to advocate for and represent the intersectionality of gender and chronic illness. So we have about 40 minutes for the discussion between the four of us, and then I'll open it out to everyone here in the audience today and online for questions. But if you have questions that pop up during any of the sharing, please do feel free to pop those in the Zoom Q&A box. So Angelina, let's start with you. Hong Kong's Financial Secretary Paul Chan recently announced the government's framework for developing virtual assets like cryptocurrencies and NFTs, which is quite new for our government, but something that you have long advocated for. So first, congratulations on really progressing this agenda. And second, what is the significance of this new framework? What potential impact could this have for Hong Kong? And what else is the government sort of planning in this space?
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Digital Art Fair, for sponsoring this panel today. It is so apropos because the Digital Art Fair is going on. We have FinTech Week, and we have a number of announcements that have been really exciting. So my new hashtag is Believe in Hong Kong. And you asked about the significance of Paul Chan and Chris Hoy's, as well as Julia Leung's announcements. These are massive. Basically, we are setting ourselves up now for Hong Kong to be a full-on digital asset hub, which includes NFTs, which includes fund management products, which includes virtual assets, and basically attracting amazing talent to Hong Kong. An entire visa and scheme to attract the best as well as develop the best in Hong Kong, which goes in line with developing Girls Go Tech, developing young women and girls into tech, and the government putting resources to help Hong Kong launch into Web3 and launch into incorporating digital assets into being an international financial center. So this is way long overdue. It is so exciting, and it's the best thing for Hong Kong to get out of our quarantine state and get into a blooming state like your flowers, Carolyn, and get Hong Kong moving as an international financial center and connecting China to the world and the world to China. So I cannot tell you except the fact that having retail, and they're actually launching a consultation for retail to be able to take part in digital assets, as well as launching an exchange-traded fund, an ETF. There's only one ETF right now in the world. It's traded in the United States, and a number of them will be launched in Hong Kong. And as well as more and more products will be launched with this new licensing regime that's coming in place called the Anti-Money Laundering Reporting Ordinance. So that's all being launched this year, hopefully bringing us all back and bringing really good talent and developing really good talent for Hong Kong.
Yeah, thank you, Angelina. That's really exciting. There's a lot going on. And I think to complement, what's going on at the government level, Carolyn, if I could bring you in from the private sector, Gusto Collective is really taking the lead on developing, new technologies, and it's not just as a medium and channel for your services, but actually you're using it for art and creative expression, which I think is quite a unique sort of role that you play. So what has inspired Gusto Collective's investment in this space, and what do you hope or do you think the impact is for us as a society?
Right. So first and foremost, for those who don't know what Gusto does, we actually call ourselves a brand tech company. And what brand tech in a nutshell means, it actually just means we tell very, very compelling stories, but leveraging all sorts of technology. And as you can see with the digital art fair, there are technologies such as generative art. There is technologies now, for example, our metahumans. So all of it is actually just to tell stories. And what better form and usage of these storytellings than through art itself? So I think part of what inspires Gusto Collective in delving into this is ultimately it's the essence of human communication, right? So art, the visual arts, is part of that dialogue. And for us, I think, first and foremost, our founder and CEO, Aaron Lau, he himself is a big lover of the arts. He's very passionate about this. And we always have a saying within the company, right? What makes a country or what makes a continent great? Let's just go for a country first. In the States, we have the Wall Street, so we have the financial hub, right? Then we have Hollywood, which is an entertainment, arts hub, if you call it. And then you have Silicon Valley, which is a tech hub. So in Hong Kong, what do we have, right, in order to rival this big power machine that is America? So we have the financial hub for sure. Now with all the new regulations as well, I think this digital asset will really take on its own life. We also have a lot of government policies that encourage the GBA's technological development. So that part we also see as a rising hub. Now the third hub is actually usually the most difficult one. It is to get all the creative talents to come into this space and give them kind of the right resources, the right tool sets, the right platforms to let their expression be known. So we see ourselves as part and parcel of hoping to push forward this movement for Hong Kong to give it more of a creative energy. And ultimately, this is also for the next generation, right? Not everybody, well, when we grew up, it was all about let's be lawyers, let's be bankers. Nobody really wanted to be artists, except Sophia here, who really jumped out of the hoop. But, in Hong Kong, this was never really a thing. So it's really exciting to see that with the Web3, with the metaverses, we are looking for talents who encompass a more creative side. We're looking for multimedia artists. We are looking for 3D artists. We're looking for all sorts of people who don't fit within those boxes that we're so used to.
No, absolutely. I love this vision for Hong Kong. And I think I think it's so great to want to turn it into, a future forward art hub. But in addition to that, I think it's important to look at accessibility and how open the space is. So, maybe Sophia, turning to you as an independent artist, how have you found the transition into the NFT space, and the process of minting your own works? Like, how complicated was that to navigate?
Well, it's gotten easier. So accessibility is very important. And since I became an artist in early 2021, I've noticed that the NFT space has gotten more and more accessible. So back in April 2021, I planned to mint my first NFT collection. It was new, and I thought I could be one of the first people I knew to mint NFTs. But when I looked into it and researched it and tried to do it, the two main barriers to entry I faced were that it was much harder to buy Ethereum with a Hong Kong bank account back then. And Ethereum, which back then used a proof of work mechanism at the time, was really bad for the environment. So in the end, I didn't mint that collection. I thought it would be hypocritical of me to say I cared about the environment and then spent a lot of money buying Ethereum, which would be bad for it. And I also didn't really have access to sort of the financial mechanisms to buy Ethereum at the time with a Hong Kong bank account. But now you can fast forward a year and a half only, and you have the government advancements that Angelina was talking about. You have local banks like HSBC. They've introduced a lot of Web3 and blockchain-based products. And you have the digital art fair raising awareness of digital art, Web3. There's creativity in the NFT space that we haven't seen 1.5 years ago. And Web3 is just becoming less fringe. And as establishment infrastructures and communities like Gusto Collective continue to develop, it will feel safer and easier to access and leverage the space. And that can be for anyone from corporations to governments to independent artists like myself. And on top of that, Ethereum is also now a proof of stake mechanism, which means it's a lot more environmentally sustainable and economically scalable. And one more element is that that's made the space more accessible. The fact that there's a broader community now, and the community is more diverse, has made the space more accessible. So when I started out with NFTs, most of my information came from American men who I read their blogs, I watched YouTube videos, just everything that was there was pretty much a white guy in the US, someone in Michigan telling me about Bored Ape. And most of my resources just came from that, and it was hard to find collectives of women or people from Hong Kong or people who were in tune with the Asian NFT market to speak to. And I don't even know if they existed back in April 2021. If they did, they weren't huge or prevalent. But now there are local communities everywhere. There's local events, there's the digital art fair. It's easy to find a mentor, or comparatively easier to find a mentor in this space. And there's just a higher volume of relevant resources for artists and collectors and enthusiasts to access. And I think that's really important to getting more people involved.
No, absolutely. Thank you. That's great to hear. And maybe just to stay with you, but also to bring in Caroline, because you both have collections here at Digital Art Fair, created with or by AI. And so, Caroline, you have the collection by the Metahuman Monarch, which is amazing. Sophia, you have your collaboration with Hanson Robotics AI phenom Sophia. So, maybe just help bring some color to this. Walk us through what inspired these collections, what the process was like, working with AI or having it generated through, a metahuman, and what do you want people to take away when they're watching this? Sophia, perhaps I could start with you, and then Caroline, turn it over to you.
Sure. So, for context, the Women's Foundation approached me in March of this year. And they approached me, human Sophia, to create an NFT with Hanson Robotics robot Sophia. And they explained that what essentially would happen is I would make an artwork, and then robot Sophia would build on it. And we would essentially have this dialogue going back and forth until we had artwork that we had both worked on and were happy with. And the science part, the way robot Sophia works is that she uses basically different algorithms that feed into more algorithms. And a particularly cool subset of those algorithms are called painting generation algorithms. And what they allow her to do is they allow her to physically paint. So what we ended up with was me, a human, who creates digital art on an iPad, and a robot who's creating fine art on canvas with real paints and paintbrushes. So it was incongruous and cool at the same time. And in the end, through back and forth conversations between the Sophias and the Women's Foundation and Hanson Robotics, we ended up not making just one NFT, but because of things Sophia the robot would pull out of the work I was giving her, we ended up making a whole collection. And I'm just going to brag a bit because this is good for the Women's Foundation, but our main piece, our feature piece, actually sold on Sotheby's last week, and all the proceeds are going to support the Women's Foundation. But the whole point in the end was this was a philanthropic project. And when it came to the creative process, for me, I saw this as an opportunity to add to the representation of Hong Kong in the NFT space and women in the NFT space. And as I mentioned earlier, prior to this project, the NFT space felt to me very much like a Western male playground. And being a woman out in Hong Kong made me feel like I wasn't one of the guys. But with this project, I was working with Catherine Young at Hanson Robotics, Fiona Knott, Lisa Withy, Inti Tan, and of course Angelina Kwan, who's on this panel. And if she counts, Robot Sophia. And honestly, besides David Hanson, who founded Hanson Robotics, everyone I interacted on this project was a woman. And that sets such an important precedent because not only can each of us who were part of this project now go on and continue to make strides in the Web3 space and do new projects and teach new women how to do this sort of thing, but it's a testament to the fact that a predominantly female team can build and launch a successful NFT collection. So the money raised is going to generate money for more opportunities like this for women. It sets precedent. It was really fun, and art was interesting to make, and there's technology that we can build on now. I think those are the three main things I'd like people to take away from the collection.
And can I just jump in to say that Sophia, you, Jillian, Carolyn, everybody as a part of this whole project of Digital Art Fair, we now have role models for our GGT program, our Girls Go Tech program. So the Band 3 young girls that are going to the Band 3 schools that we're actually helping in our development programs to get more women into STEM will have great role models like all of you to actually say, wow, I can do it too. I can get into NFTs. I can do art. And these are the two areas in particular, digital asset plus art, and the whole talent area and talent appreciation are the other things that the government really, really wants to push as Hong Kong tries to work on becoming an art and tech hub. So I think this is amazing as the first start, and all of you guys have been amazing.
Thank you, Angelina.
Thank you. And actually, just a little shout out to all the interns in the back there. So today I decided to bring over some of our high school interns from my alumni, South Island School as well. And I think it's actually a great exposure. Wow. Exactly.
Oh,
this is something that we probably would not have thought of back when we were in high school, right? No. Digital art, AI art, all of this stuff. So I think this is a great exposure to the new generation of what you could do in this space. So I think kind of bridging on from what Sophia was saying about how you guys created the art. So maybe I'll give you guys a bit of background on Manok. For those who don't know her, she's actually what we call high fidelity meta-human. And she's one of those avatars, well, it is an avatar and an IP in their own right, whereby we actually created her using 3D models. And the thoughts and theories behind Monarch, actually. There's a lot that goes on, and I feel like this slide might go very quickly, but we'll have a look through. So Monarch, she's a mix between East and West. That's why she is a Eurasian. And we gave her a personality. We created this. But obviously, this is all man-made. So we can talk a little bit more about the ethics of a team, how you create a meta-human. But here we can see the beginning stages of when we first iterated Monarch and what happened here. You can see the 3D models that our team took to actually make her face look the way she does. Now, she's also an interesting character because she can traverse between the metaverse and also reality. So we made it so that we could work in a virtual environment with her. And for now, she's already had pieces that she's done previously with Phillips Auction House. This one was actually with the LCSD, the government at the Tamar Park, right? So this is the art at the Tamar Park project. And finally, just as a brief showcase, this is what Monarch has created for the digital art fair this time. And it's called Corona Florella. And all of this was generated through COVID data. I'll get into a little bit more background about that. But the behind the scenes, I wanted to showcase how all this data and the science behind it are fed through algorithms to generate all these art pieces here. And each of these pieces actually have a bit of a meaning to them, right? And, you know, she's also a great talking point at this point. This is just showing that, you know, despite the 1 month, or actually not even 3 weeks that we've been here, she's already generated a lot of noise for her art pieces. And you guys can follow her at Instagram at Monarch. Now, back to her art pieces, why we decided to create Corona Florella. So Monarch is a juxtaposition of what is real and what isn't, right? And also data and emotions. As a meta-human, she can't actually feel the way humans do. Yet she looks like a human. She wants to actually feel like what a human ought to feel like. But all she has is data. So with COVID, this is a topic that our team decided to choose because it was such an impactful moment when humanity kind of grind to a halt and we just stopped the way we were doing things before. And there were a lot of elements to COVID, the way that we went digital, for example, and the way how we also dealt with life. We might not need to socialize as much in person anymore. It was a shift in the whole paradigm of how we lived. So Monarch took all this data and we separated into a course of 4 years of data of the spread of COVID globally. So all of this data, by the way, is actually available publicly. Then we also got the data of the death rates. We got the data for the vaccination rates and ultimately the recovery rates. And all of her 6 art pieces in the digital art fair revolves around these data sets. So just now you saw maybe like a little bulb with some interesting little specters inside of it. So we fed it into the algorithm which generates the movement of these digital art pieces. And each of the bulbs represented perhaps like a continent. And the balls inside of it would be a country, and inside of that would be the particles. So the particles actually showed per country what the infection rate was at the time of this duration, right? And likewise, as we go further and further along with the different art pieces, in fact, right behind Lisa, we have a whole showing of the entire spectrum of COVID data. Now, the question then we ask, right, is it art when a meta-human created by a team of humans creates art?
Yes.
What is the artistic expression in this, right? So this is a way of visualizing the data. The art is a way of visualizing the data. But ultimately, we are shifting the perspective. We're asking the viewers themselves to participate in the artwork by putting in your thoughts and impressions of what this represented to you. Now you know all the facts, you know all the data. Some people look at the flower and go like, wow, for the death flowers, why are they so beautiful? Why do they bloom like so joyfully in a way when you're talking about death? But we didn't put that into your head. We just told you this is data about death. How you interpret it, that is the human element. And I think that's what makes art really special for each of the people who view it. They have different impressions of it, right? And that's where the dialogue also comes from. So if you guys have a chance and you go look at the artwork just down the hall over there, right next to Sophia's artwork as well, you can see that we've created a bonsai garden so that you could have that moment of reflection to look at this garden of many, many different alien flowers that represent coronavirus and see what you can take away from the art itself.
Yeah. No, that was
Notwithstanding, it's just
lovely.
gorgeous, Caroline. I've told you that many times.
Thank you.
It is.
I'm sure Manak would be happy to hear that too.
Yeah. No, I like what you said about that shift in perspective, which I think is so important during, a health crisis. But really at any point in time, to help us reflect on how we're progressing or where we're moving. And, I'm interested maybe to hear from Sophia as well, because your collection with Sophia the robot touches on the theme of gender equality, right? But what does it mean for a robot to be weighing in on issues of social justice, or looking at kind of these very, very human themes? And so perhaps you could build on or weigh in on what Caroline said about this being part of a reframing, or reinventing how we look at certain things. What is your take on all of this?
It's so interesting because when I tell people, oh, I worked with a robot, the immediate, maybe it's like all the movies that got made in the early 2000s, but the immediate response is always to assign agency to AI, or think that there's an ulterior motive or there's an emotion. As humans, we just want things to feel the way we feel. Like, we attribute feelings to animals that aren't there. Like, I think my dog is a person because she smiles at me. She has no idea what she's doing. And it's the same with like AI. We genuinely really want there to be some sort of deeper emotional connection. And at the end of the day, we haven't built technology that is human. We've built robots and metahumans that run on algorithms and data. And so when it comes to expecting or wondering if a robot is going to be able to understand the pandemic or understand gender equality, the short answer is no. But I think it's only natural for us to want to ascribe emotions to things that aren't sentient. But I think that the word reframing or framing that you used is important, because I think technology essentially is just framing the human experience for us. And the art produced by AI, or AI in general, is a bit of like a Rorschach ink blot test. You know, that sort of test where you see like splotches of ink and you tell the psychologist what you see? It's very much that. AI can be that Rorschach test where humans will interpret data-driven results, like coronavirus, and they will interpret it differently depending on their own psyches. And to me, the role of robots and metahumans is to frame the human experience so that different artists can interpret these frames and based on them create unique, individualistic art. And so they're a good tool that artists like me can now use to generate things and get our inspiration going, stimulate new ideas. But that's all they're doing. They're sort of holding a mirror up to nature, but there isn't an intrinsic emotional motivation within them. They're another tool we can use.
No, I like that interpretation as a tool, because I think that also allays like a lot of concerns or fears that people might have around AI and the development of technology as potentially taking over some of what humankind has, and so it's really, I think, quite comforting, but also just exciting to think about it in terms of how we can really enhance and amplify our own kind of experience as beings that can create and that can think of art, and just really leverage technology to do that even better. So that's really just great to hear from both of you. Thank you. I wanted to pivot the conversation a little bit to look at an area that is one that we work on, at the Women's Foundation, in terms of looking at the inclusivity and the gender representation in the space as a whole. So, Web3 has been touted as this space that's far more inclusive than its predecessors, and there's this hope that it would widen access to populations that are less visible and their voices are less heard. And I think that possibility is still there, but there was a report from earlier this year from Gemini that noted that only a quarter of those that invest in the Web3 space are women. Women are only 15% of Bitcoin traders, even among the NFT market, which is a several $billion sort of market, is that women comprise only 16% of those who are, artists in that space. And so, Angelina, maybe you can tell us, what you think the reasons are for this lack of diversity. And I'm also interested to hear on what you think we can do to really increase the diversity that we have, and not just as people who are consuming or observing this space, but that are really investing in this space, that are co-creators of this space. How do we make it that much more accessible?
Well, if you don't mind, Lisa, I'm gonna just give a 2-second introduction of the difference between Web 2 and where we're moving with Web 3.
Yes, thank you.
So basically, with Web 2, you had the centralization, you had the advent of very large corporations that kept their data by themselves, from Google to Facebook to even Instagram. But what you saw was everything was centralized in one area, and you had to go in and be a part of that. You posted, you shared. With Web3 and what Web3 stands for as the next generation of the World Wide Web, you're seeing that it's changing to decentralization, and you're seeing everything move to more efficiency. So Sophia talked about being on the Ethereum blockchain. For some of you who actually either trade Ethereum coin or on that blockchain, there's a lot of people that have been building on it, and because of it, there's a lot of traffic jams because a lot of people jam into using that blockchain. What Web3 will do is it will allow you, if you're using it and programming your new blockchains on it, it will allow you to jump chains. It will, if one chain is very congested and the gas fees to use it or the fees to use it are expensive, you'll be able to move to another blockchain or another blockchain or another blockchain, making everything more decentralized yet efficient. And there will be something called oracles or nodes that will actually be controlling and allow for even more decentralization, but yet connectivity to bring more people into the space. So it's not just going to be one giant corporation. It will be a number of people, entities, companies that will be working together. And I think that's the most exciting part of Web3 right now, because it empowers anyone, young people, women, men, to actually get involved into the whole Web3 world. And because of it, you're going to see more participation because of that decentralization. And this is why it's so important for Hong Kong and for the rest of the world to start embracing and start planning. And I think for a geek like me, I love the infrastructure, because the infrastructure that is being built now by many, many different companies is going to complement that. And the more nodes that are out there are ways that people can get more involved in the whole network. And that's why they're developing more and more ecosystems to allow new developers, artists, companies like Gusto to start getting involved in Web3. So in a nutshell, how do we get more women and girls into this industry? How do we get more investors in this industry? Well, first of all, there has to be a business case. Women aren't silly. If they're not going to see something that can't make money, they're not going to jump into it right away. But the other thing is adoption and training. Our Girls Go Tech program, where we help young women and girls get involved. Carolyn's internship program of immersing young students from high schools and colleges into these areas and making them feel comfortable with digital assets. People are really, really daunted and are scared about, oh, is this real? Are these real things that we can actually trade? Is Bitcoin even real? And that's a part of the education process, as well as having role models like Sophia, like Carolyn, like yourself even, Lisa, and Sophia the robot, that they can do these things, that they can invest in these things. And you're seeing more and more women come out to the Digital Art Fair, FinTech Week, and Token 2049, and all the different conferences. And as more people learn, as we talk more as a part of our webinars, it's going to be important to encourage more investors, especially female investors, into this area, to back other females to grow this whole area. And then finally, Hong Kong itself, Hong Kong government and Hong Kong Inc. needs to also be encouraged to actually help women and girls, as well as the entire Hong Kong population, understand what is Web3 and how do we move forward as a knowledge-based digital asset community, as well as virtual assets, as well as a fintech hub for the future. So a lot of work to do, but I think we've got the pieces in place where we've got the people, we've got the investment by Hong Kong and Hong Kong Inc., and we've got the spirit to do it, and that's what we need to actually move forward with through TWF, through Digital Art Fair, and through the Hong Kong government.
Oh, thank you. That's a very really helpful kind of comprehensive, ecosystem overview of, the different parts that are fitting together. I think that education piece is just so vital.
It is so vital.
And yeah, it's really good that we're hearing, it coming from different places. Different generations are being sort of brought up in this, so that it's normalized, right? Which I think is so important. And there are also kind of other potential opportunities as well. So I wanted to turn to you, Sophia, to look at, you had mentioned, that sort of nexus between NFT and charity, which you're so kindly, have been working with us around your collection. We're super grateful. But I know that, prior to this, you've been asked often to donate your work to charity, which in traditional art spaces, right, presents a set of challenges, let's say. And so I'm curious to hear, what, whether or not that transfers into the NFT space, whether or not there are new opportunities for it as sort of a philanthropic, hub, and whether that sort of also enhances, your own identity, right, and sort of what you stand for around, these different social issues that you really raise awareness around.
Yeah, so you mentioned it in my bio, but I'm chronically ill, and so one of the realities of being chronically ill is that sometimes I just physically can't work, and I can't churn out art. And one of the realities of being an artist is that when people find out you can draw, they will ask you to draw stuff for free. And it's always for charity, so you feel bad, but there's always a lot more stuff that you should be doing that you can't be doing. And when you're chronically disabled, it makes it harder. So when I did this collaboration with TWF, it inadvertently gave me a blueprint where I realized, I can make a contribution to charities through NFTs that is compounding and scalable. Because normally what happens is I'll draw something, it'll take, a month or a few weeks, and I'll donate the print and it'll sell at a charity auction and it'll generate a couple $1,000s, and then that's it. We can sell versions of it, but it's not really generating the amount of money that would justify me making it, would justify or the amount of time that went into it, but it was a nice gesture, and we can say we raised a couple $1,000s. But now, because of the royalty system of NFTs, the Human Sophia, Robot Sophia Future Values collection is generating revenue not just from the initial sale at the Digital Art Fair on Sotheby's, but any subsequent sale of those artworks on the blockchain is going to generate a royalty for TWF. So there's a passive stream of income now. And that means every time a piece is resold, TWF makes money. The NFT designs are also monetizable through licensing and merchandising and print sales. That's not Web3, but you can expand that through Web3 and through the blockchain. And so the monetization potential for one artwork that I've made is now exponentially compoundable, and you can fundraise exponentially, and there are no more extra inputs of time or resources or labor. TWF just receives the royalties now. into their crypto wallet. And because of that, the project for me, it's inspired and empowered me to apply this new model of compounding scalable art to other philanthropic projects. And I think it's an important precedent to set with other charities that there are ways to fundraise that just have better opportunity costs, I think. Because sometimes it can feel like a waste of time, but it's well-meaning, so we do it. Whereas now this is really practical, this is really exciting, there is value to it, and we're only getting started. I feel like as the space develops even more opportunities are going to show up.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I think just to give the audience a quick reminder, if you have any questions online, please do drop those into the Zoom Q&A. Before I open it up to Q&A from also here live in the Digital Art Fair, I wanted to pose a question to all of you, just about what developments you're most excited about. What's upcoming, what might not be a reality yet, but is getting there, that you think has such potential in the Web3, NFT, AI, all of it, that space. So maybe Caroline, if I could start with you.
That's a huge topic. There's so much going on. I mean, generally whenever we go on talks, people are like, Gusto, you do everything within this space. And we're like, yeah, we do AR, VR, metaverses. So that's a huge topic. Now, for us, actually, if I just look into the metaverse potential, right? So that's a couple $1 trillion worth of markets in the next coming 10 years. Now, when we look at the metaverse right now, most people just see it as, oh, you buy a piece of land, that's it. Maybe you build some educational games on it. That's all the utility that the current technology allows for. And a lot of the words that get bandied about that maybe you guys have heard or maybe not at all, interoperability, that's something that we talk about a lot of. What that means is actually a metaverse for us, or at least Web3 for us, is the next iteration of the internet, right? In a metaverse, it's a 3D environment that you can interact with people in it. So think Zoom, but you're even more immersed than Zoom. But then is that it, right? Does that also stop us from interacting in real life? Not really. So in my own personal view, I'm actually very much for an AR version of a metaverse, right? So we need the tech. We need some glasses, which already exist. They're just really, really expensive, and only hospitals, can afford them to do microsurgeries. But once we get the tech that's lightweight enough, the interactive face with the internet, or what's digital, will become very, very different to how we see things now. So I would say at this current point where we are now, most of the interfaces come from our computer desktops and from our phones. Now, think it could be a contact lens, could be glasses, could be something else altogether. But a way where we can put an augmented reality layer into how we operate in the real world that can also blend into the virtual world. Then you're opening up options, tons and tons of options. For the finance side, you can do maybe like KYC in this virtual world. You can get digital money out off the counter in a digital world. For us, when you look at any piece of artwork, or even like simpler still, retail, right? You look at a pair of shoes, you like the pair of shoes. I just need to, click it on and be like, oh, so this pair of shoes comes in X amount of sizes, X amount of colors, and this is the price, and I can just check out online and just get it delivered. I don't even need to really shop in that sense. I can try it on. But so a lot of the ways that we interact, I think that would change drastically. And I think that's really exciting to see what humanity will develop next.
Yeah, super interesting. Sophia, what are you most excited about?
Honestly, mine's similar. So one of the things that really frustrates me about being chronically ill is I'm physically limited. And everything I do, I have to sort of factor in how will I physically be able to interact with the space. And during COVID, I noticed that the shift of going online and doing everything through Zoom suddenly leveled the playing field for me, because everyone was suddenly on a screen with me. No one was, I wasn't the odd one out anymore who had to call in because I couldn't make it to a space or something. But Zoom feels limited still. Yeah, we're on a screen right now, Angelina and me, but it would be better if we were there in some slightly more in-touch capacity. And I feel like with the metaverse, there will be another leveling of that playing field. And that feeling I had when suddenly everyone was on Zoom and I wasn't so physically separate will feel even more real in a metaverse context. And I'm not the only chronically ill person in the world who would need that. I think especially with long COVID, it's become a real, like, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia are becoming even more prevalent than they were. And we are going to need spaces that integrate the disabled community and the abled community in a way that is not super isolating. And Zoom's an improvement, but it still feels a little distant. There's Zoom fatigue. With the metaverse, having spaces that physical limitations don't need to play a part in planning a day, planning an interaction, I would find super helpful. And I think there's a growing population that would also find it super helpful. I'll speak to the art thing as well, just because I'm here in the capacity of an artist. I also like where NFTs are going and the direction they're going in, because when I think about NFTs, essentially they're just files. They're just like, you could have an NFT that is a video or a picture, but you could have a music file. You could have a series of documents and things that go into each other in 3D models. It's a boundless opportunity there to create art. And on top of that, some NFTs also include communities and experiences. So in my artistic capacity, having a space to create art that no longer needs to be confined to a canvas or to a file type that you can export as a JPEG is a very, very exciting thing to think about. And I think it will enable artists to create more exciting artworks.
Oh, that's so exciting. I mean, it's so nice to hear. I hadn't really thought about it in terms of leveling the playing field, in terms of kind of that inclusion piece, like that engagement piece from, people of all backgrounds and, all kinds of, complexities that may not enable them always to be, in a particularly physical space. Like, that's very exciting. Angelina, what about you?
So I'm sorry if this sounds so cliche, but I cannot think of anything else that can describe the next 5 to 10 years, because there's going to be so many more developments. Basically, what can be imagined can be achieved. And if you take that as your mindset, using the metaverse as an example, I can see in 3 to 5 years' time, the cost of those Oculus glasses will come down drastically. You will be able to visit Sophia's online gallery in the metaverse. You'll be with your avatar walking in. You'll be able to pay for that stamp beauty that you like. You'll be able to buy financial services products through the bank that's set up down the corner. You'll be able to have a virtual lunch with your friends and have a natter with them as you sit down and discuss, what are we going to do next in terms of business plans? And then you go down to your friendly virtual asset trading venue, or even better, an exchange where you can see people open outcry. I mean, what can be imagined can be achieved. And that's the only boundary, is that we don't get creative enough. And that's something that I don't think is going to stop here, because we've got some amazingly creative people like Carolyn and Sophia here. So you're going to see shifts in the way we do things. You're going to see shifts in electricizing, or basically making everything in a dual world that will be more efficient. And we can make this new metaverse world even more efficient, coupled with Web3. And I think that's the part that's going to be most exciting, especially for the young people that we're trying to involve in STEM subjects. We hope to get more women and girls into STEM subjects, studying in university with the scholarship programs that TWF is going to be offering with our sponsors. So if we can get the human side geared up to just think without boundaries, we can actually imagine anything. And that's what Web3 will allow us to do in terms of moving between metaverses, moving between blockchains, moving between products. and there's just no stopping us if we can just move forward. But the only thing I would caution is that we don't turn into some dystopian environment, but we keep to, this is a tool for us to make society better. This is not a tool to take over us or a tool to be used unwisely. So I think with great change, there has to be great wisdom in this whole process. And I think that's the part that all of us will need to be. Women and men will need to work together equally. Not just boys, not just guys, which is what, Sophia, you've seen, but we need to do this together, men and women. So, and AIs too.
Yes. Okay, I love that. What could be imagined can be achieved. So keep that in mind, everyone. I'd like to now open it up to questions, and maybe I'll start actually with the floor. Are there any questions from the audience here? Anyone?
I have
Okay.
a question for Carolyn.
Yeah,
Of
go for it,
course, go
Angelina.
ahead.
When are we going to see Manak coming out and teaching audiences about digital assets and things like that, or coming shopping with us?
Right. Well, actually, a lot of developments have been happening on Monarch's side. So since I've joined, we've been able to animate her fully in the sense that she can actually talk in a video. She has a sound box. Now, the next thing that we're going to hopefully be able to do is put trackers on different people's faces so that they could actually have the face of Monarch and operate her in a way behind the scenes. So we did have her come out in the flesh through Cyberport. So we worked with one of the other Cyberport incubatees who does holographic boxes, and we managed to make Monarch appear within a holographic box. So there are many, many ways and interesting new technologies right now we can leverage on that. But the next stage is we've been approached by TVB. They're like, hey, we want Monarch to star in some of these TV series. And we're like, we'd love to, but for the moment, our tech can't go that far in terms of live interactions yet. So we're working on that. Another question that I usually get asked, by the way, Angelina, is when will Monarch become sentient?
Yes.
Yes.
My question too.
Well, that's the question, right?
She and Sophia, the robot, can sort of hang out together and have tea, and maybe we'll be able to join them.
Don't introduce them. They should make art together.
So
That's the
actually,
next step.
maybe we could ask, Handsome Robotics to be like, hey, can we, leverage on your AI software to make Monarch sentient? But the interesting thing about metahumans is I think a lot of brands, because most of the time it's brands who utilize metahumans, right? They want to ensure that their brand remains very much true to the essence of what they represent, not like Kanye and what he did recently. So with metahumans, the reason why they're so popular lately is because you can program them or you can access them so that they are very, very good spokesperson for a particular thing. Which means, is there a need to make them sentient or not, right? It's like Mickey Mouse. Would he ever say the wrong thing? Right? So that's a thought process, and I mean, we can go into a whole different debate on the ethics of metahumans, but I think maybe I'll pass it back on to Lisa for
Yeah,
this.
because that could be a whole day-long conference, I think, of delving into all of the different kind of areas around the ethics. But we do have a question that I wanted to pose to you all. Let me read it out. To fully embrace Web3, you still need a lot of bandwidth or power equipment, such as computers with high-res screens, capable to process 3D models, VR headsets, which is still something which is only accessible to privileged people in many places. So do you all see this as a barrier for underprivileged people getting into this promising platform? So, maybe, I know, Angelina, you touched on this a little bit, but perhaps just building on how can we make the tech more accessible, for people to really engage with this space. And then I'm really happy for Caroline, Sophia to weigh in.
Well, you can see the cost of monitors now. I just bought a monitor recently, and it's a little bit more than a couple $1,000s, which used to be like in the tens of thousands of dollars for what we're getting now. Computers are getting faster and faster. But what we'd like to see, and what Hong Kong government has sort of stated, is we are going to move towards a knowledge-based economy. And I think these requests should be brought up to the government. They do have resources. They're actually going to be putting out more training resources. There's a CEF fund that you can actually apply for training for, and I can see that the government will be funding schools and making this equipment more and more accessible. And as more and more enter into this industry, you're going to see the cost of, as I said, the Oculus glasses, computers. I mean, computers have just gone down so much in pricing. So not-for-profits as well as TWF, we've been actually repurposing computers from big companies. We can go and ask big companies, hey, let's work together to sponsor schools. Let's work together to give the underprivileged computers and teach them to be a part of this knowledge-based industry so that they can be fully functioning to make Hong Kong as a financial center. So I think these are just some of the ideas that we can work with all of the big CEOs that are currently in town visiting the HKMA. I know that some of the sponsors there have and are a part of our Girls Go Tech program. So I think we as intermediaries, as charities, as well as art fairs, could actually have a public and social good part where we work with large organizations to get people empowered into this area.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Caroline, Sophia, did you have anything to add to this?
You go first, Caroline.
No, go for it, Sophia.
No, I was very thank you, Wanda, for the question. It's important, and I feel like this is still very much like a rich person's playground. Like NFTs sometimes can be so expensive, and it very much is like rich people buying other rich people's art and minting more stuff, and it is inaccessible. When it comes, and I don't want to like invalidate that or say that it's not true, because it is true. From an artist perspective, I'm going to just speak really quickly to creating NFTs. There are ways that I teach digital art that do not involve computers or iPads. And I feel like when it comes to the education aspect, when it comes to empowering especially kids to learn how to create art that could become NFTs, a lot of the teaching I do does not involve the technology, because there are principles and practices that need to be learned first before you hop on an iPad. For example, understanding layers in Photoshop is a really complicated thing to teach like an 8-year-old, but once you show them how it works using tracing paper, it is something that they can click. And then as soon as they get hold of the technology, they're using it. They're using it within an hour because they have that foundation. And of course, at some point you need the technology, but I think while we're waiting for things to get cheaper, while we're waiting for things to become more accessible, there is still stuff we can teach young children about art that prepares them for digital art. One thing that some people ask me is, I didn't become an artist until a year ago, and I picked it up very quickly, which was weird, and people were confused, and I was confused. And I tried to figure out why I was able to transition from my job in like IT audit to digital art so quickly. And it was because there were principles of how layers work and how computer programs work and how algorithms work that I knew from past experiences that were easily translatable into a digital art space. And I didn't necessarily need all this expensive kit to get started. So from an education perspective, the barrier to entry it's not necessarily financial. It's more having teachers available to teach essential skills and principles. And then once the equipment is available, like Angelina was saying, you can apply the skills you already have and get going pretty quickly when it comes to at least art and NFTs.
Yeah.
And I think these conferences, Lisa and Carolyn and Sophia, having role models out there, talking more about this. And yes, Lisa, you were right. I have been pounding about this, about Web3, about digital assets for the last 3 years since I was COO at one of the major digital asset firms. And by talking about it and getting more and more people interested in it and more people into it, you're going to see a sea change, which I never thought I'd actually be able to see. And I was so excited with this last FinTech week. Now we need to make it happen. And they've imagined it. Now we need to make it happen.
I think I just quickly add on to that conversation. With technology, it's always about iterations, right? So the microwaves that we have now at home used to be military-grade kind of technology. It just takes time to get to a place where mass adoption is possible. That's not to say, feel disheartened now, you can do nothing within the Web3 space. No. Anybody you don't need to have the highest res computers. You don't need to have an Oculus to still interact with the internet. Right? It's the learning, as Sophia and Angelina were saying. Education, most of the time, is very accessible, especially with a lot of the initiatives and also the talks we do. The second thing about Web3, though, which is quite interesting, is the concept of community, right? So a community, basically, it's not necessarily, you could also have very, very rich communities that hang out and like buy NFTs and Bored Ape Yacht Clubs, that kind of thing. But you also can, create a different type of community, such as, the Women's Foundation. That's a different type of community altogether. And the barriers of entry aren't that high at all, in fact. So long as you're interested, you can join with these communities and find people who you can talk to. And that's the great thing about Web3. It actually removes certain layers of social hierarchy when you're all just on a forum chatting together. And I think that part, you can glean so much knowledge from people like Angelina. I'm sure she's on some Discord communities masking as one of those NFTs. You just need to be able to ask the question. Yeah, exactly. And you can ask her anything, right? And these are people usually, so far away that you can't talk to, or even like the celebrities we had at Clubhouse, right? All this new tech allows for more accessibility already. It's just the problem of the hardware. And the hardware is coming, right? All the governments all around the world, what they're trying to do always is actually to make things more accessible, to give people more resources. But we just need time to catch up to it. So in that sense, I think, yes, we'll wait a little bit till, those hospital-grade glasses becomes much more affordable. But it's coming. In the meantime, we can still express ourselves through crayons, through iPads, through all sorts of, even just talking, right? That in itself is already an exchange of knowledge.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Thank you all so much. I'm going to stop you there. We're at time. So just kind of takeaways from this last point is around this continued dialogue, this talking about these issues, normalizing these spaces, the art in NFTs, Sophia, the education piece, making this accessible through very kind of already available tools that, people have to be able to visualize what this really looks like in a digital space. And to your point, Caroline, about community and really the possibilities that we have to connect with each other in such different ways by utilizing some of these newer developing spaces. And it's just really, I think, quite exciting to see what's going to be coming next. And I'm really looking forward, to hearing more about, Gusto Collective's next project, Sophia, Hotung, whatever you have next in mind, which I'm sure is fabulous. And Angelina, you're always so active in this space, and so we know that there will be a lot coming out of your brilliant advocacy in making this, really a priority for all of us. So a huge thank you, Angelina, Caroline, Sophia, for your time. Thank you, Jillian, Joyce, everyone at Digital Art Fair for inviting us. It's been such a lovely time speaking with you all, and thank you all in the audience for joining us as well. and online. So have a wonderful afternoon, and looking forward to connecting with you all another time.
Thank
and Lisa
you.
Moore, hostess with the mostest.
Yes, thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.